Right, welcome back, guys. So, not long ago, I was working on a project with one of my collaborators, and I used this word chivalry to describe one of the values that I want to pass on to my sons, of which, so far, of course, I have none. But my teammate looked at me and, in so many words, asked, "What do you mean by that?" And so I thought, well, chivalry, like, you know. And then I thought to myself, what does that even mean? Like, I use the word, but what does that even mean? So I went to the dictionary. And what I found in the dictionary both surprised and delighted me. Basically, the definition of chivalry is the qualities of a knight. And the dictionary that I was reading summarized those qualities in 4 words: courtesy, generosity, valor, and dexterity at arms. So this is, when I read that, I thought, this is the whole spectrum. This is everything I want to be. So I'm going to break them down, right? Number 1, courtesy. This is the word that I would have found without looking at the dictionary, kind of the old-fashioned etiquette of opening doors and scooting in chairs, which incidentally has all but vanished from our society as it is. And why? I can think of at least 2 reasons. Number 1 would be that women are generally being taught to value being strong, for themselves above all else, and so can be more sensitive, more easily offended when a man tries to be strong for them, along the lines of, "What, don't you think I can open my own door?" And there's many reasons for this. One of which, of course, is the feminist movement. But you know what I think gives the feminist movement its steam? I think it's rogue masculinity. Feminism wouldn't have a point except for chauvinism. That is, masculinity run amok. So rather than railing on the global problem, maybe we can just concentrate on the personal one. Second reason is that I think some of us practice chivalry in spurts. That is, we practice with a special vigor when we have something to gain thereby. For example, we will rush to open the door for a pretty girl, but we don't for the homeless one. The rest of the time between these spurts of chivalry, we're a bit of a jerk, which is a fancy way of saying we're selfish and we're self-interested and self-absorbed. And so even the good things that we do for kind of selfish reasons, i.e., I'll be a gentleman, I'll be gentlemanly, but so that I get, the right kind of admiration. And certainly that's not all of us, and it's not all the time. Nevertheless, I think it's a call to check our own motives. So number 1, courtesy. We're talking about chivalry, and courtesy was the first definition. Definition number 2, generosity. You remember back in the day, in the dueling ring, in the day of knights, they would inevitably get to the point where one knight is on the ground, the other one has him, at the tip of his sword. But then what would happen? The one on top would sheath his sword again, reach out his hand, help the second one up. This is generosity. It is being in a position to do harm, but doing good instead. And as I thought about this week, I thought, well, times have changed a little bit. The likelihood of me getting in a duel or a knife fight with anyone is pretty much 0. But do I not often find myself in the situation where I had the opportunity to stick a knife in someone's back via my words? Okay, we're talking about generosity and not gossip, but I'll digress into gossip for a moment. Oftentimes, gossip, we define it as talking behind someone's back, often things that are inflated, exaggerated, things that are not true. But in the context of generosity, what if it is true? What if what you're sharing, what you're telling is absolutely, factually, positively, identifiably right and accurate, but it's just not nice? Maybe that would be a time when we put the sword back in and simply don't. Let's remember that one, honorable knight. Okay, number 3, valor. Again, this one's pretty obvious. Knights were mighty men of valor. Have you ever read anything or studied anything about David and his mighty men? These guys were crazy. One of them jumped into a pit with a lion on a snowy day just for the purpose of seeing if he could best the lion, the cornered lion. Yeah. Another little collection of them hacked their way through a garrison to get to this well so that they could get 1 cup of water for their commander. And then they hacked their way all the way out without spilling the water. I'm thinking, for these guys, odds of 1 to 100 when 1 is me and 100 is the enemy. We're just like, no big deal. I'd be freaking out. But as I was thinking about this week, I suddenly thought, what if they were freaking out too? I have heard it said that in order to be brave, you must first be afraid. I have heard it said that there is no such thing as valor, no such thing as bravery, unless there is cause at first to fear. So I have not fully, digested all the implications of that statement, but in so much as I have, part of it rings very true, and that part is good news. That part is that valor is not something we feel. It is something we choose. It's something that we live out, whether or not we feel it, which means it's available to all of us, not just those of us who are, feel up to one-on-one combat with a lion in a pit on a snowy day, just, to see what we can do. Again, good news in my humble opinion. So, courtesy, generosity, valor. Fourth one. This one is the beautiful clincher for me. Dexterity in arms. What does that mean? Well, it means you're handy with a sword. We don't use swords like they used to use swords. But what are the implications of being handy with a sword? It means offensive, defensive. It means you're qualified to be a bodyguard to the weak, to the women, to the king, to his court. And in one-on-one combat, you're qualified to defend and protect yourself as well. Interesting. Again, we don't use swords like we used to, and yet we have these spiritual battles, such as I was referencing in episode 3 last week, the purity problem. And it's clear that in such battles, God wants us to be qualified to carry the sword and protect and defend the weak and the women and the king and his honor and his court. So what we do, good news, right? What if we've messed up? Like all of us have messed up. So this week I was contemplating the story of David. He was a mighty man. He was a man after God's own heart, and he messed up. And at the end of his life, he wasn't able to do what he wanted to do most, which was build a house for Jehovah, because God said, you're a bloody man. You have blood on your hands. You can't do it. Your son Solomon will do it, but you can stockpile gold if you'd like. That was a disappointment. And yet this story is a beautifully balanced narrative to me. Here you have David, a man after God's own heart, fallen, redeemed, restored, still limited, but limited not by the grace of God. He was limited by his own choices. This is where the picture just kind of fills in full color for me. When I fall, I drop my sword. And grace gives it back, because that's what forgiveness does. But my grip is a bit weaker, my sword, and so hypothetically kind of, if this was a parable, my grip is a bit weaker, my sword has to be a little bit lighter, a little bit shorter. Maybe it can do less harm, but it can also do less good. Now, my grip on my sword and my use of my sword will strengthen my grip slowly so that it can begin again to reach into more and more dark corners of the earth. But if this picture is accurate, then the opposite must also be true. That every time I choose to stand, my choice makes my sword longer and it makes my arm stronger until I am qualified to do war with angels. Chivalry, courtesy, generosity, valor, dexterity in arms. That's a little crazy. And yet maybe that's what chivalry means. All right, that's it for today. Like, share, and subscribe as always. And for the roar of the lion and the love of the lamb, I'll see you next week.